welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, your Indiana Hoosiers beat the Florida State Seminoles at home in the Big Ten ACC Challenge, 80-64. It was Indiana's first game against, obviously, a good opponent, as we know, as we've talked about. And after jumping out to an 11-point lead at halftime, the Hoosiers saw Florida State just slowly chip away at the lead. Segment after segment, Florida State would make up 2 points, make up 3 points, until they came all the way back to almost getting it tied and maybe taking the lead back, and Indiana exploded over the final 6 minutes of the game to end up winning by 16 in a game where the Hoosiers made plenty of mental mistakes. And there's going to be so many things for Archie to look at in the film session and for this team to clean up. But for them to still win by 16 points, they did it with toughness. They did it with playmaking. They did it with togetherness. There were contributions off the bench. It was just a terrific performance from this Indiana team, and a game that, without really knowing what we had after that playing that November schedule, that I think everybody can feel good about with the Hoosiers getting a big victory. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, and we are going to break it all down for you on this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. And let's start this show the way that we start every show, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. For the banner moment, I'm going to about the 6-minute mark in the second half. It was 63-58. This, again, is, Florida State had cut that lead down. It felt like it would be a dogfight all the way to the end. And you'll remember this play. Devonte Green was dribbling out top. Looked like he was over, looking over at Archie Miller, trying to get some instructions for what to do on the play. And his defender reached for the steal. And so Devonte quickly goes behind his back, drives in, takes contact, scores, made it 65-58. And this was one possession after he had, I think, committed his fourth turnover with just an atrocious entry pass into Joey Brunk that got stolen. But when it was his time to make a play, as he was all night long, Devonte was ready. And I love this play because it was what allowed Indiana to overcome those mental mistakes. It was toughness, absorbing the contact, making the bucket anyway. And when it was his time to make a play, he made it. And that's what Indiana did over the final 6 minutes. When it was guys' time to step up and make a play, they did it. It gave Indiana that 65-58 lead and proved to be the decisive points because Florida State would only get to 64. That bucket, even if Indiana didn't score again, they would have won. But on a night when Devonte Green was outstanding, and you probably could have picked from 15 different plays that he made, that to me is the one that stands out the most. That is the banner moment. And our banner moment tonight, as always, is brought to you by our friends at Home Field Apparel, a company that was founded by an IU grad and that remains based in Indianapolis. And, by now, hopefully you've been to homefieldapparel.com. Hopefully you've ordered some of their gear. It is the most comfortable gear that you could find. The t-shirts, the sweatshirts, so soft, so comfortable, even after being washed. And they have unique logos that you're not going to find anywhere. The Bison logo, some of the logos that they released this year during the football season. I mean, where else are you going to find a Xander Diamant t-shirt celebrating the bucket win, right? Well, you can get that t-shirt at homefieldapparel.com and so many other items that they have there. And because you're a member of the Assembly Call audience, you get a big discount. They had their Black Friday sale going on. It was 30%. It was huge. That ended, but Assembly Call listeners can still get it. Use the promo code CYBERASSEMBLY, and through Friday, you can still get 30% off your entire order. And we have some new Assembly Call gear there, too. That really comfortable sweatshirt material, our script Assembly Call logo is now on it. If you go to homefieldac.com, you'll see the Assembly Call selection. You can use that promo code CYBERASSEMBLY on those items, too. So homefieldapparel.com, or go to homefieldac for the Assembly Call collection, or go to homefieldiu.com to go directly to the IU collection. So many options for you, and that promo code CYBERASSEMBLY will get you 30% off your entire order. All right, well, it is time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. And let's start with Ryan Phillips. Ryan, your rant on this Indiana victory.
I got to be up in like 6 hours, but I'm here for the duration, guys. This was awesome. It was really great to see Indiana put in the kind of defensive intensity. There were lapses and there were mistakes, and there's things that this team, which is still ridiculously young, has to clean up. And we saw a lot of gaps open in the second half for easy drives, and they were letting Florida State get too deep. Whatever. I'm looking at the first half, and the first half, after that opening stretch where they got some subs in, was fantastic defensively, just fantastic. And though the second half was ugly at times offensively, and it was stagnant, and they got bailed out by Devonte Green time and again, the thing about it is, you thought the first half was great. They scored 41 points. They scored 39 in the second half. They shot 56%, 55.6% for the entire game. I mean, when they had their opportunities, they converted them. The key is making sure you have those opportunities over and over again, and don't get bogged down the way they did in the second half. But again, a young team still trying to learn how to fight through these things. Trayce Jackson-Davis, kind of invisible for a few stretches of the game, needs to learn how to be a 5-star, needs to learn how to assert himself more. So it's not just Devante Green out there making plays individually, which we saw a lot of tonight in easily what I think was the best game of his career. I don't even think it's close. I know he's had, close to as many points before, but this was just, had he not made those last couple free throws, had he not hit that last three, I still think it's the best game of his career, because he was willing to lead and willing to be the guy, and was making smarter decisions for a lot of the game. What I'll also say about that, Devonte Green, you can say that, well, he kind of bailed him out at times. Well, yeah, that's why you have Devonte Green on the roster, though. I mean, that's why you don't let a guy like that transfer out of the program. That's why you have a guy like that and you put your faith in him, and why you become the president of the Devonte Green fan club.
Great night for the fan club.
Is because you believe in a guy like that, and you believe that he can make plays for you and make plays that help you win a game. We didn't see the balance tonight out of IU that we've seen offensively, but we saw a lot of balance defensively. We saw balance on the rebounding. We saw balance on the turnovers. I mean, but that's the thing about this team, though, is that they are going to win or lose as a group. They're not going to win or lose based on, Romeo Langford has to score 25, or Juwan Morgan's got to get a double-double, or, what we saw last year. I think that this team wins and loses as a group. And I think we saw, some of their strengths, some of their weaknesses tonight, but at the same time, they're a tough team that plays really hard. And they really did lock it down defensively in the first half, and got a 15-point lead at one point, and did allow Florida State back into it. But again, this is a team that there's a lot of mistakes from this game that they can learn from. And look, the turnovers are going to be an issue we're going to get to, but until Rob Finney is back and able to run the point the way we know he can, turnovers are going to be an issue for this team. And tonight they were able to overcome it because of the way they played on the defensive end.
Andy, your bottom's line on this IU victory.
I mean, a lot of different ways to go, but I think we'll talk about Devonte a lot. His performance was outstanding, as everyone knows. And there was a stretch in the second half where he looked like the only guy who really wanted a part of the fight that they were getting from Florida State, who really just tries to grind you down over the course of the game. They're so physical. They just wear on you. And I think any IU fan, whether you've watched Florida State or not, you could pretty much see how that game was going. And it was hard not to sit and worry about what this game was going to look like in the last few minutes, when this team had really just gotten leaned on the entire game by them. And I thought the team responded incredibly well. They made some good subs, and it's a good segue to a guy that I don't know that we'll talk a ton about, but I thought had some really big moments, even though he made basically one dagger and didn't do a whole lot else offensively, which is what he's known for. I thought Dez Anderson gave this team some big time minutes off the bench, because once Florida State basically chained their two large goons to the bench who would not be heard from in the second half. I mean, IU really had a hard time figuring out a way to play Joey Brunk for any kind of stretches. And so that really meant that IU had to turn to somebody else to play in that rotation. And Archie turned to Dez. He put Jerome in for a few minutes, who struggled in that situation. He was really able to lean on Dez, and he still makes mistakes defensively, but he was busting it out there, trying to get in the right position. He made some good recoveries on plays like that, and just was steady. Didn't do anything spectacular short of that, 3-pointer. And he had another one rattle out where he went on the wing on a fast break. But I thought he played really, really well. There's a lot of good things to take away as you spin forward for this game, but should be a confidence builder for him. And a sign of a guy stepping up when the team really needed somebody else. He didn't handle the ball a ton. Those things were challenges without Rob, as you guys have mentioned. But I thought a really solid performance from him, and I think somewhat emblematic of what Ryan said about guys really liking to play for one another and really grouping together during a stretch of the game where Florida State usually usually kind of grinds people out, and you would think that would be the end. And that group that was on the floor there over that key stretch really pushed IU over the top.
Ryan, you want to hop in here?
Yeah, Dez Anderson, I really wanted to jump. That was going to be my next topic, Andy, so you really hit a great one there. Dez played 20 minutes and was plus 13 and only had 3 points, but he was out there for 2 really key stretches. One of them was he was in that first group of subs that came in. I don't know what point that was at, Jerod. I'm sure you've got that marked down. But
it was right after the first media timeout.
So it was after the first. I wasn't sure if they had subbed right before that or right after.
Yeah, it was 11-7, and our defense had been terrible up to that point.
Awful. They were getting to the hoop doing whatever they wanted. He brought in, I believe it was Hunter, Demezi, and
Race.
And it was Race.
Yep.
Demezi.
The first 3 he brought in were Demezi, Race, and Devante. And they basically scored 7 straight points right away, and then did a similar thing in the second half, and they forced 4 straight turnovers. So
and the intensity ratcheted up a huge amount there, and really that was impressive the way they did that, especially with a guy like Demezi. Look, a team like Florida State that has really good perimeter players that can attack and score and are athletic and step out and shoot threes, and aren't just one dimensional. They're going to attack a guy like Demezi because they know they've seen on film he's not a great defender, and he stepped up and moved his feet, and it was night and day. And I've been a guy who's been really hard on him defensively and said, well, he's got to make shots to be on the floor. If he doesn't make shots, then he can't be on the floor. He played really well tonight. Like, he absolutely did. And I think, the crowd had a lot to do that. Guys' intensity ratcheted up in that first half. Second half, he come out.
He's just worked his butt off to get better. He has steadily gotten better defensively the last 4 or 5 games.
Agreed.
Coach pointed it out a few games ago when he sat on the bench because he wasn't playing defense. And since then, he's really gotten better.
And I'll say this. The intensity of the crowd really got a few guys focused and playing hard. Jerome Hunter looked a lot better defensively in the first half. In the second half, he ran into some, he made some poor decisions inbounding the ball, and I think that affected him defensively. But Demezi actually took over inbounding the ball and did really well with it. He was decisive on his inbounding, and then defensively, he moved his feet. He was locked in. He was focused, and you could tell that big game atmosphere got him kind of ratcheted up. You could just see it. He sometimes his face doesn't change, and he's kind of, he looks a little sleepy out there, just kind of wading through, looking for a shot to shoot the ball. No, he was really focused and really locked in. So that was great to see. I mean, I hope it's a consistent thing. I hope it's not just like one big game, everybody got locked in, but got to give credit to him. Also, craziness on the night, playing a team like Florida State. It's worth noting that Devonte Green was a plus 24 on the night against that backcourt. So, I mean, dang.
he rose to the occasion. He absolutely rose to the occasion.
Yeah.
And I talked about that huge play that he had in the second half, and I mean he had so many throughout the night. It was almost like, every time Florida State looked like they were going to come back and cut into the lead, and there was a stretch where Trayce did this, and we're going to talk about it to lead off the next segment. But pretty much every other time it was Devonte making a play. Go back to the first half. It was 22-20. I think Indiana was up like 22-16. Florida State went on a quick little 4-point run. They got it to 22-20, and Devonte was like, And he made a three-pointer. He had a great pass to Justin Smith that set up a dunk or set up an and one, and boom, right there, it's 28-20. I think he would make another three-pointer right after that to make it 31. And he just did that all night long. When a play needed to be made, he stepped up and made it. And you can live with the turnovers. You can live with some of those mistakes, because the thing that this team, what did we talk about all offseason? Why was Devonte so crucial to this team? Because he's got that one thing that no one else really has, is he can just go get you a bucket.
It's the Troy Williams effect.
He can create a shot. He can drive into the lane. I mean, he had a couple beautiful drives. One time early in the second half, he rejected a screen and just drove right in and had that little up and under. He can do that.
Yep.
And
the spin on that was unbelievable.
And look, we're going to talk a lot about the good things, because there was a lot of good tonight. Al Durham did not play well in the second half. I don't want to say that he shrunk from the moment, but he didn't bring it in the second half like he brought it in the first half. And I don't know if it was fatigue or what it was, but Devonte basically had to take all that playmaking role. And Armand Franklin really did a nice job too, and we'll certainly talk about him.
Yeah.
But, Devonte had a lot on his shoulders in the second half, and I know he had the 4 turnovers in the second half. I don't think he had any assists in the second half either, but the playmaking, sometimes, especially against a great defense, you got to just have a guy that goes and gets a bucket. And he did it tonight to the tune of 30 points. Now, one other guy that I want to mention this segment, and again, we'll talk about Trayce next segment because he was spectacular. we got to talk about Justin Smith. Because, Ryan, I think we all noticed early in the first half, he had that play where I think he had turned it over, made a terrible pass,
a bad pass,
and just jogged back. Didn't it looked like one of those? It's like, Justin, if you hustle, you're a great athlete. You might be able to block this shot,
or at least affect the shot.
Yeah, and it just kind of looked like he gave up on it. That proved to be the outlier. Because he was tough. He played hard. One of my favorite plays of the game was late in the second half. And I believe it was 65-58. Someone threw a bad pass, and the ball was about to go out of bounds. He dove on the floor to save the possession. I mean, fully laid out, which everybody was doing in the second half, and it was great to see. He ended up they ended up calling a timeout. He got fouled after a strong take in the post, made both 67-58, and that was part of that little stretch there where, Indiana extended the lead out and just wouldn't give it back. So, Andy, I thought, on a night when so many guys played well, I thought Justin Smith led with his toughness. Like, I thought he was really tough defensively, and I thought he got on the glass pretty well, and just those little plays, laying out, saving possessions, that helped Indiana combat the turnovers. That, Dez Anderson tapping out a couple of rebounds. Like, Indiana was
that last one was huge, especially. Yeah.
Yeah, Indiana was able to be opportunistic, saving possessions, which helped to compensate for the 18 turnovers.
Well, and Justin did that at the end of the first half when Al got forced into the corner, took that shot, it gets blocked. Justin heads up, gets it, turns around, shoots, and makes a basket that pushed the lead back up to double digits at halftime. Yeah, you guys, we texted about that play earlier. I thought defensively at the beginning of the game, he was really, really intent on where he needed to be. And I think he continues to, I think if you really watch him defensively at the beginning, you see why Archie raves about how good he can be defensively and how much he's learned about where to be in the system and doing those kinds of things. I thought he played really well on that end and was a guy who matches up pretty well with what Florida State has. They've got a lot of like athletic wing type players, and particularly the way they played in the second half, it allowed him to slide back to the 4 as IU played a bit smaller lineup, but he gives enough versatility. And the other thing, there was a couple times that he really, when other guys didn't seem to want to even handle the ball, he was not afraid at all. I think that's a testament to him. That was something he said he really wanted to work on in the offseason. And there was at least once, maybe twice, that he ended up bringing the ball up the court because other guys kind of got there and he confidently brought it up. And I think you continue to see that confidence grow with him. As you said, the play that we looked at as being a poor one did become the outlier in that scenario. And really did play tough, continues to be a good free throw shooter over the course of the season, did get jinxed by the announcer, missing those last couple after he went after that ball and took a spill. But just another solid performance from him, and another game in which when we get to game balls, which will be perhaps the least
controversial one.
Yeah, least controversial. There you go. That's the way to do it. Pick ever. It's another one where he probably under other circumstances would be the second guy in line potentially to get it based on some of the plays he made, but was overshadowed a bit by a career night from Devonte.
Yeah, Justin just looked like he was willing to attack at times. I mean, I'd like to see more consistency in that attacking, but he was aggressive going for rebounds that bought him a couple fouls there. And he wasn't wilting. He was playing like an upperclassman. And I'd like to see him maybe work on some more one-on-one stuff when he gets isolated on the wing, or maybe there were a few times he posted up. It looked like he could have gone and he kind of kicked the ball back out. Those were my only complaints, though. His effort was, and other than that opening play, I texted all you guys. It was just like, this better not be what we get from him tonight. And it wasn't. It was one bad instance. And he showed a lot of effort and was really focused. And I thought, played one of his better games. And hey, 35 minutes out of him.
And to be fair, that bad play came right on the heels of an outstanding defensive possession where he helped and recovered beautifully and then got an offensive putback. So it's not like it even took him that long to get in the game. He made a couple huge plays early, but he was great. Justin really led tonight, and that was great to see. All right, coming up as we continue our breakdown of Indiana's big victory over Florida State, I will point out tonight's meaningful moment that you might have missed. It's going to feature Trayce Jackson-Davis, and then we will go inside the numbers to highlight the most important statistical notes from this game. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Stick with us.
This is Jordan Halls, and I never miss a shot, or an episode of the Assembly Call.
Thank you, Jordan. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, and we are breaking down Indiana's 16-point victory over Florida State in the Big Ten ACC Challenge. And it is time now for tonight's meaningful moment that you might have missed. We're going to spend a little time talking about Trayce Jackson-Davis because, look, this was the Devante Green game. Devonte answered the bell over and over again. We talked about, how tough Justin was. But I thought there was a really important stretch in the second half where Trayce basically kept Indiana afloat and for 2 minutes just owned the game for Indiana. And it started when it was 57-52. The offense was getting a little bit bogged down. It's about the 8:20 mark, and Trayce basically just took it from the top of the key and said, I'm just going to go score, and had a huge dunk, put Indiana up 59-52. The crowd's going, and you kind of thought, okay, here we go. We got the momentum back. Let's get going. But on the next defensive possession, Florida State misses a three. Indiana doesn't box out. They get a weak side rebound for a dunk. Then a turnover. Florida State scores, and all of a sudden it's a 4-point swing. We lose all the momentum. It's 59-56. And they're going in on the next time they get the ball for a layup to cut it to one, which would be the closest that they've been in a long, long time. Trayce blocked it. Just another one of his incredibly instinctive, athletic block shots. And then the next defensive possession, he got a steal, was basically just single-handedly keeping us in the lead as the offense was struggling. And then came down on the next possession, got an offensive rebound, got fouled, knocked down his free throws. And for that 2 minute, right after that is when Devonte took over, hit his bucket, and then, obviously Indiana blew the game open. But I really thought, Andy, that stretch from Trayce was huge because not a lot was going on offensively or defensively for Indiana. And it's almost like for that stretch, Trayce said, guys, hop on my shoulders. I got this. I'm going to protect this lead. And then, you guys can help me close it out. But for a freshman to make that many plays in a short period of time, against a tough team like Florida State, I was just really impressed with what he was able to do there.
Yeah, things were really teetering at that point, I think, for IU, as you mentioned. And he was able to be a steadying guy, even when things were a bit frenetic. And, the challenge for him in a game like this was there's so much pressure on the guards outside. How does he get himself in position to get the ball? Where does he get it with chances to, how does he give himself opportunities to score? He had the one nice drive for the dunk, as we talked about, which was a good one. But it was a challenge to really get him the ball in post-up situations, particularly in the second half with all the pressure that was there. But he found ways, whether that be through rebounding or just general activity level, to work his way into free throws and get himself to the line, and certainly block shots, but also altered some others as he was in the lane. Guys you could tell were a little bit they knew he was there and would try to either initiate contact or fall away from him at times going to the basket. So I think there were a couple shots around the rim that Florida State missed that could potentially be attributed to the defense that he played. So it wasn't his, I think to Ryan's point, wasn't necessarily his best game. I think it was just because it was so difficult for him to really get the ball in a comfortable situation. But stepped up and made big plays down the stretch for a guy. He and Justin played the most minutes of anybody. I think they each played 35 when I looked at it last, which is a decent amount more than anybody else. And so in a game that physical, to be able to do that, he was playing a lot of having to close out and recover on the perimeter when Florida State went a little bit smaller and was putting some of their big guys out there. So he had to cover a lot of real estate defensively to do what he did. So he's going to continue to get better at that part of it, but a good early test for him that he passed overall with some solid stretches of play like the one you mentioned.
Yeah, I think adjusted for competition and context, this was by far the best he's played. It may not be the most eye-popping box score numbers, although 15 points, 8 boards, 2 blocks, 14 free throws, that's pretty good box score line.
5 of those rebounds were offensive.
Yeah, and 35 minutes in a tough physical game. That's a freshman. God, he's good.
And the 2 steals were big too. I think that the thing about Trayce in this game, and it happened more in the second half. And look, he played a ton of minutes, so I'm sure he was playing a ton of minutes against really good competition. I'm sure he was worn down a bit late. You saw his free throws kind of flatten out a little bit at the end. He's going to be tired after this one, and I think it showed on the court a little bit in the second half. But he only took 5 shots. The problem is he got fouled on a lot of the shots that he took, so those don't count. But he was 3 of 5 from the field. I didn't think they force-fed him the ball enough in the second. Andy's right. The passing lanes were closed. They tried to throw some bounce passes into him, which I don't know why we're throwing bounce passes in traffic, but that's for another show. They didn't get the ball to him enough, I think, in the second half to let him go work. And when he did get to work in the second half, he was getting fouled, and he was using his aggressiveness on the boards to get fouled, and his ability on the defensive glass as well. He'd get fouled in some scrums there, and he got to the line. He took 14 free throws, and the fact that a freshman is getting the respect of the officials to get that many calls, Romeo certainly didn't get that last year, and the reason why is because Romeo's working on the perimeter primarily. If you're working in the post and you're doing the right things in the post, you're going to wind up getting foul calls. And Trayce has done a great job of that this year, getting to the line and using his ability, not necessarily to score from the bounce, but to get fouled when he goes up. And that is a skill. Getting to the line is a skill. James Harden is making a career off of it right now in the NBA. It's something that helps your team out to get to that line, because you put the other team in a bad situation with fouls, and then you also are able to get those free points at the line. He missed 5 of them tonight. Again, I thought he looked tired at the end, and rightfully so. He played 35 minutes, and he's a freshman. I mean, you're gonna wear down. But I thought he did a fantastic job getting to the line and asserting himself enough to get to the line, despite not having a lot of one-on-one opportunities in the paint to score points.
He is in the top 115 in 10 different statistical categories on KenPom. His free throw rate, 98.4%. He's taken 61 two-point field goals and 60 free throws. It's a freshman.
Yeah, that's pretty
It's amazing.
But I mean, they can't stop him when he gets one-on-one. Yeah. I mean, you really can't stop him when he gets one-on-one. In the rare cases he does get one-on-one. So what happens? Guys foul him. I mean, that's just the way it is.
This was a game, not the team. It was brought up a lot, certainly brought up a lot on the broadcast of this being the first real test, but he certainly from an individual standpoint was a guy that I think there were, I don't know necessarily questions from IU fans or whatever, but there was definitely like the level of physicality that was going to be there in this game, the level of athleticism that he was going to go up against is not anywhere near what he had faced. So there was I think people were, and rightfully so to a certain extent, curious to see whether what he had done so far was, how much of that was influenced by the competition. And I think tonight was a good step in the direction of really proving himself and saying, hey, there's not going to be a Big Ten team that is going to come up against him that is really going to, they may make him struggle. They will certainly challenge him, but one that is going to be able to really shut him down, because in a game, like you said, Ryan, he only got credited with 5 field goal attempts, was certainly fouled on a number of those, but didn't end up taking a ton of shots in that regard. And struggled to get the ball at times, was still incredibly impactful on the game. So that's a positive sign for sure as you look forward.
One more moment that stood out, and there were a lot of these that I could choose from for this guy, but I thought this was just really emblematic of the kind of game he played. In the second half, Armand missed a 3 in the corner and hustled after his miss, ended up driving in, great shot fake, scored the bucket. This was kind of another little lull for Indiana offensively, and Florida State had cut the lead to 7. That put Indiana back up 9. Just a really huge play. And I thought, Ryan, all night long, Armand did the little things. He ended up scoring 9 points, and he did some nice things offensively, but, had 4 rebounds, only had the 1 turnover. But it just seemed like every time there was a hustle play to be made, Armand was in there doing it, being physical. You never want to criticize a guy too much after a win, but, in a night when Al Durham, again, I thought was not able to handle the pressure and the physicality of the game, which has been something we've seen from him. And it's just, as he continues to mature as a player and a leader, it's something that he's going to have to get better at. Armand, for a freshman, I thought was much more ready for that on a consistent basis tonight. And, look, he still has to be able to hit jump shots more consistently and all these different things. But for a freshman to be that ready for just the physical kind of grinded out nature of this game on both ends, really impressive performance. And you know what you could see? You could see Armand's confidence growing.
Yep.
Like he had some open shots and he took them. And even though he missed a couple of them, he was in rhythm. He didn't hesitate. And he was just out there to make plays. And I think this was a big stepping stone game for him.
he was far more confident bringing the ball up than anyone else on the floor. I thought Devonte at times looked comfortable, at times kind of was looking to pass the ball as quickly as he could. Look, against the press, you're supposed to pass your way out. You're not supposed to dribble your way out. But if you ISO the dribble, sometimes you can get out of it that way easier. Al did not look comfortable bringing the ball up at all, and he shouldn't. He's not a point guard. He's supposed to be the backup point guard, the starting off guard and a backup point guard. And Rob Finney's supposed to do that.
He still could have done it better than he did tonight.
I'm not arguing with that. I'm just saying that's not what we have him on the team for. It's, he was forced into action, basically, is what I'm saying. And I thought Armaan Franklin looked much better doing it. And I thought Armaan had a steady confidence all night. And I think Al got rattled a little bit by the defense. And I don't know. We'll see how this plays out with Al next. But he needs to be playing off the ball more and not on it. And I think that Armaan Franklin's a guy who needs to have the ball in his hands to initiate the offense. I think Armaan is the backup point guard. I think that he has established that early in the season, that he should be the backup point guard behind Rob Finney. The other guys should be playing off the ball. You bring the other guys in for a 3 to 5 minute stretch when both of those guys need a break, but they're not the guys that you want primarily handling the ball at any point, because they're just not there yet. That's not where their skill set lies. And look, I think that Al did some positive things on the defensive end tonight. Offensively, it just wasn't there. I thought that he had a couple drives that were like really nice, and you were kind of like, okay, Al's getting into the game now. And it just,
I thought in the first half, he did. I thought he played well in the first half. I thought he passed up some opportunities to really go downhill and go at the basket early, but then he really started doing it the second part of the first half. And he ended up getting a couple layups, did have 3 assists. It was more in the second half. And I don't know if that was fatigue physically or mentally, I don't know. He didn't look like the same guy from half 1 to half 2 to me, because for a big part of the first half, he was aggressive and handling it well. So, something happened. He just wasn't able there in the second half to continue that on. But yeah, I mean, that's just something that, especially if Rob's out, look, I love Devonte. We're not always going to get 30 points from Devonte Green,
and look,
Al's going to have to.
Where we get 8.
I mean, maybe we will. Who knows? Anything seems possible with Devonte right now, Andy. But that's where Al's going to have to be the guy to pick up that slack. He didn't tonight. His teammates picked him up. Awesome. It was a great team win, and he contributed to it. But that's just something with the guard issues that we have and the lack of depth, something to watch out for moving forward.
Yeah, with Al, I mean, I think the play that typifies that a little bit is, Trayce ended up starting to bring the ball up the floor, and then Archie's losing his mind yelling at Al to go back and get the ball from him. So, but with Armaan, definitely that play that you mentioned was a good one. He only ended up with 1 turnover on a night when pretty much everybody had more than that. And I thought generally when he was bringing the ball up, he didn't seem to let them speed him up in a way that they were able to really speed everybody else up. I just remember even at a time that he was bringing up the ball against Trent Forrest, he's one of the better defenders in the ACC. He was just methodical about kind of moving him side to side and, crossing him over enough to, protect the ball and get up the court. But it wasn't hey, I got to blow by this guy and get there. He was calm, at least seemed to be for the most part in those scenarios. So I think that's a good sign, because that's a skill that is difficult to cultivate in anybody, let alone a true freshman playing in that environment. So I thought it was an impressive performance from him. I think, your point about him growing in confidence over the course of the game is something that I think other guys got less confident at times over the course of the game as Florida State, leaned on him a little bit more. But I thought he did play well, made a couple big shots, made his free throws down the stretch and grabbed 4 rebounds. So a fairly solid all around game from him in a difficult environment. And, again, we kind of go back to, don't know when the starting lineup changes. I know that was brought up a couple times tonight before, even before Devonte scored 30. But, I think Armaan is playing in a way that his performance tonight isn't one that says like, hey, this guy doesn't need to start. I don't think this team, if everybody's full strength and where they need to be, I don't think he's a starter on this team. But he's making it at least a little bit difficult for somebody to say, hey, you shouldn't be out there. You shouldn't be out there starting. I thought it was a solid performance and a really tough test. His first big time test for him tonight.
I mean, Archie tends to be a guy that likes to let starting lineups that are working roll, and this lineup is working in terms of results. And maybe, I hope someone asks him, because maybe also he likes, Devonte's scoring punch when that bench unit comes in, and some guys function better when they can watch a few minutes of action. Devonte could be that guy. I don't know. It certainly worked tonight. Let's go inside the numbers. I thought there were 3 key numbers to look at tonight that I wrote about in our community earlier today. The first one was free throw attempts. I thought that number, given what these two teams like to do offensively, and the fact that Florida State puts teams on the free throw line a lot, I thought that was, really where Indiana was going to have an advantage if they were going to win. And if you told me coming into the game that Indiana would shoot 38 and Florida State would only shoot 16, I would have felt really good about our chances. If you also told me that we out-rebounded them by 10, I wouldn't have thought that a 16-point victory would be outlandish. And that's exactly what Indiana did. And from a turnover perspective, because that was the third number, Indiana finished with 18 turnovers, not good. They did force 14 on Florida State. And the one other meaningful moment, there was a stretch in the second half where Indiana forced turnovers on 4 straight possessions. And the way that they
travels,
did it
right?
is, well, yes, it was all travels because they competed with ball handlers. What have we talked about? Compete with ball handlers. You don't necessarily have to beat them, but you've got to hustle and, get back. Don't let them beat you to the basket. Redirect them. And that's what Indiana did. They just challenged ball handlers with competitive, tough defense, and it forced Florida State into travels. The other turnover was when Devonte slapped the ball out of the guy's hand and it went off his leg. So, yeah, you don't want to lose the turnover battle by 4, but given the context of what Florida State's defense likes to do and the fact that you were able to out-rebound them and do what you wanted to do, dictate the style of the game by getting to the line that much, those numbers really ended up in Indiana's favor. I thought they were the keys, and basically, they worked out to what should have been a 16-point victory, and it was. And so that was nice to see Indiana able to really do the things that they wanted to do coming into the game from that perspective. Andy, what else jumped out to you from a numbers perspective?
Yeah, the turnovers were interesting in both halves. That IU turned the ball over a ton in the beginning of the first half. I was trying to do the math on this for the second half, but I think IU had turned it over maybe 5 times in their first, handful of possessions in the second half, and then 1 over the remainder. And then the second half, it was, maybe 10 of their first 25, they're turning the ball over, which is 40%, not great. But that led to a stretch at the end where they stopped turning the ball over, and during that run scored on almost every possession down the stretch, just because they were actually able to take care of the ball, and got to the free throw line, did all the things that you talked about there. And it just was kind of night and day, which was odd to me. In the first half, I kind of understood it in the sense that maybe it overwhelms you at the beginning and you work your way into a good groove and you take better care of the ball as the half goes on. The second half, that was surprising. You actually felt like it would get worse, although there wasn't a whole lot of room for it to get worse given how it was at times there. But the numbers that you talked about were really the big ones that stood out. I think from a defensive standpoint, I think IU only had 1 steal and no blocks at halftime, had 4 blocks and 4 steals in the second half. So even though in some ways from a defensive standpoint, they struggled a little bit at times in the second half, I thought there was good activity level there. Second chance points were pretty much even. Points in the paint were pretty much even. It was really, the margin of victory was 16 points, and that's how many points IU outscored them at the free throw line. So I think continuing to be able to do that, like so many other things, there were questions: is IU going to be able to do this once the competition ratchets up? And this game is a little bit hard to gauge because Florida State does play so aggressively that they are apt to put people on the free throw line, and the percentage wasn't as good. Free throw defense is back though, 44% from the line tonight.
Awesome.
Hey, there we go. It's also probably worth noting Florida State, this was their 3rd game in 5 days. They played back-to-back games Friday, Saturday. They look like they ran out of gas a little bit down the stretch. And so I don't know if that contributed to it too. But Indiana just had more toughness, more fight, more energy those final 6-8 minutes.
That nice coincided with Indiana stepping up defensively as well. So yes. I think that the two combined to, this wound up being a 16-point game. It doesn't feel like a 16-point game. It feels like they won a close game because for most of the second half, it was a close game. And once Indiana started pushing, the crowd got back into it, the defense ratcheted up, and it just felt like Florida State was ready to get out of there. That's the way it felt to me anyway. I I think that talking about tiredness takes something away from Indiana's win, because Florida State really got it going in the second half, early in the second half. And I think that Indiana really dropping the hammer there in the last few minutes to sort of reverse that tide, that's what caused them to look tired. I think that until then they were going off adrenaline, because they were really in the game, and got down to 3 several times, and Indiana didn't let it get any closer.
I mean, look, it's hard to come back on teams. And we talked about how Florida State was just grinding their way back, but we also made them grind too. So I agree. Like I think any fatigue that they had at the end, certainly our play contributed to it, and the way that we were just ready for the fight at the end of the game. Just getting,
which I think would surprise a lot of people, given the age of this team, given the fact that they hadn't really played anybody and all of that. Indiana got punched in the mouth and punched back, as opposed to just taking it and trying to run the clock out and with the win. They actually punched back and closed hard.
This looked like the kind of team that we've been promised, from Archie Miller. I mean, a tough team. And I mean, some of the defense that we saw, especially that defense from about the 15-minute mark to maybe the 6-7-minute mark in the first half. I mean, that was amazing.
That was elite
defense.
That was elite defense.
Yeah, just outstanding.
Also worth noting, Indiana, well, I guess I'll save that for statistics. I actually have some statistics this time, Jerod.
Well, this is the statistics segment.
I thought Andy was going to go.
We're still. I already talked. We're still on the podcast. Don't worry.
All right. 1.1.
Will this be on the podcast?
94 points per possession against that defense is awesome. And also, Indiana led for 34 minutes. They got the lead and held it and didn't give it up, and only trailed for 4 minutes and 43 seconds. So you're at home, take the lead and hold it as long as you can. I think that's because it's tough to come
Good
back.
Strategy.
But it's tough to come back at Assembly Hall. I mean, we've had games before where they've made great comebacks and won at the end, but it's if you're the team if you have the home court advantage of an Assembly Hall, you want to wear teams down with that lead, and making them climb that hill with that crowd involved is so difficult. So I just feel like that's the way you win at Assembly Hall, is to get a lead and force the other team to play better than they've been playing, as opposed to maybe starting slowly as we've seen and then coming back, and no, get the lead early and build on it and get that crowd fired up early, so you're not in the second half, you're not making a run hoping the crowd can lift you.
And remember, it doesn't always have to be a dunk or a three that gets the crowd back going into it. Sometimes it's a hustle play that gets the crowd going.
They were all about that defense tonight. About that defense tonight.
Yeah. Andy, one final note.
Yeah, just looking at the assist numbers, it was an odd kind of looking at both halves. So Florida State only had 2 assists in the entirety of the first half. I think that speaks to the defense that you talked about, really forced guys to make individual plays. And there was a couple times at least that they made really difficult shots with either the shot clock running down or just guys just having to throw the ball up. And then IU turned around, gave up 3 assists really early in the second half. I think before that defensive switch that we talked about with bringing in different personnel, going a little bit smaller, and then they had 2 assists for the entire rest of the half. So again, got back to making them do that. Now IU was a little bit the opposite of that, where they had 7 assists in the first half, just 3 in the second. Some of that is getting to the line 26 times and not getting as many shots. Some of that is having Devonte Green just be able to make great individual plays when you really needed him to. But just I thought limiting Florida State in that way is another good stat to talk about how good the defense really was in spurts, because that to be able to just say, hey, might get beat off the dribble a couple times, and that certainly happened, but really being able to force things within the flow, because when IU's gotten torched, it feels like against teams like this, teams start making a bunch of threes, they're swinging the ball around, guys are getting in rotations and doing that. They weren't giving up made baskets on those kinds of plays more often than not tonight.
One more number. I saw Jack Grossman tweet out from Florida State's little pregame stats that they send out to the media. There was a note that Florida State 7-0 this season when they outscore their opponents.
Oh,
still 7-0 when they outscore their opponents.
Yeah, that hasn't changed. One last note, with all the fouls that were called in this game on Florida State and everything, Indiana only had 1 player with 3 fouls, and that was Armand Franklin.
That was almost Jerod Davis in 1 minute.
Yeah, and everyone else was 2 or fewer, so they guarded without getting into foul trouble, and that's again really huge to the Big Ten season.
Especially in the backcourt, because Armand is the guy that ended up with 3, but he got those 2 pretty early, and it was another case where he ended up playing a little bit in the end of the first half with 2 fouls, in some ways out of necessity, just because there weren't enough guards. But there's probably some ability for IU to get into a little bit of foul trouble on the front line, but not in the backcourt. So a good job by them to really stay out of it, because things could have gotten a little bit dicier from a ball handling standpoint without him.
Yep. All right, coming up on the assembly call, we will hand out our game balls. That should be a fun discussion, and then we will hit any other lingering storylines from this game. Then we will look ahead to Indiana's upcoming game against Wisconsin. Then it'll be time for last call. Lots still to do. That's next here on the assembly call. Stick with us.
This is Nick Zeisloft. I never miss an open three, and I never miss an episode of The Assembly Call.
Thank you, Nick. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game, plus every Thursday night at our website, assemblycall.com. While you are there, make sure that you sign up for our free IU Hoops email newsletter. Over 7,000 of your fellow IU fans have subscribed. You can also text IU to 66866 to subscribe to the newsletter. That's IU to 66866, or just send Ryan a text, and he'll make sure that you get put on the right list, because he knows how all that works.
We'll see what we can do.
I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, having a very jubilant and celebratory episode of the Assembly Call. This is our 8th victorious episode of the year, but it certainly feels different than the others. A lot more fun, Andy, than the kind of the, I don't know, somber is not the right word, but it certainly wasn't a very fun South Dakota State episode.
I was glad I didn't have to be on that one.
Yeah. This one is a lot better. All right, well, it is time now for our Game Ball segment, sponsored by Trayce Jackson-Davis, who has won 5 of them coming into tonight. He has 5. Al has 1. Devonte has 1. Feels like a night where it might go to someone besides Trayce Jackson-Davis. I'm just going to go ahead and hand mine out first. It's going to Devonte. For all the imperfections of this game with the turnovers, much more good Devonte tonight than bad. He was 10 for 15, 5 of 7 from downtown. Indiana was 7 for 15 overall as a team, which is big. I mean, they matched Florida State. Both teams hit 7 threes. Devonte's were huge. I mean, that's the role that he's going to play on this team, and he did all the stuff that we talked about in the offseason for why he's such an important cog. But I'm gonna say 2 other things that we haven't mentioned. Devonte had 6 rebounds tonight. He was second on the team in rebounds, and I thought defensively for most of the night he was tough. He was up in them. And I thought he really set the tone defensively. That was the first thing I noticed about him when he got on the court, is he was there to play defense tonight. And, so that was great to see. So the points are going to get the headlines, and rightfully so. And people are going to talk about the turnovers, and rightfully so. But rebounding and on-ball defense, to me, they weren't as important as the points, because at the end of the day, sometimes it's just nice to have a guy who scores 30. But the fact that he did it all, I just thought from your upperclassmen, from he and Justin Smith, to really be out leading with that effort, with that toughness, was really big. And I thought he brought it from the first moment he was on the court. So he gets my game ball for a number of reasons. Ryan, who gets your game ball?
I mean, why are we even doing this? It's Devonte. That was the Devonte show tonight. As good as he's ever been in an IU uniform, good for him to do it as a senior. 5 of 7 from 3 tonight. Some of them were questionable, but they kept falling. It was really funny. Every time he'd pull up for one, he was like, you can tell he's heat checking right now. And the answer was yep, every time. He was on fire. IU finished 7 of 15 from 3 tonight. 5 of 7 from Devonte. That's the reason. So they shot 46.7%, mostly because of him. And on the year, Devonte Green is hitting 52% of his 3-point shots. This is the guy you need. You need a guy on this team who's going to be able to do some things from the perimeter. I think Rob Finney can do those things too, but he's not with us right now. And so Devonte Green stepped up in a huge, huge way, and he gets the game ball, no question.
He's still with us. He's here. He's alive.
He's not on the show. Where is he, Jerod? Have you booked him as a guest yet?
So Andy, you have the luxury now. You can kind of go off the board and give honorable mention to somebody. Tell you who's not going to get honorable mention: the announcers. That was not a well-announced game from my perspective, and clearly from.
Was it an ACC crew? Was it an ACC network crew?
I think that's an ACC network.
I think it was. I mean, that makes sense that they were talking on Florida State that much, quite frankly.
Andy, who do you want to mention for your game ball?
I mean, I feel like my credibility would be called into question if I went with someone other than Devonte, as you suggested.
Give it
that
to
I could go off
Devonte
the
and then
board.
give someone honorable mention.
I'm going to give it to Devonte, and then I'm going to share these couple quotes that came from the postgame about Devonte that I think all of which tell us and really reinforce everything that we think we already know about him. So Archie's quote was, Devante Green was special tonight. There wasn't a lot of coaching that went into what he did, as usual. I thought was good. Then the other one was when the players, Justin Smith postgame, and when Devonte Green gets hot, I tell him to keep shooting, but take good shots. To which Green apparently replied, "Every shot's a good shot."
That's
tonight,
the least shocking.
Tonight
quote of
it
all
was.
Yeah.
Let's just linger on this because there is a 2 for 15 with 6 turnover game coming that we're going to lose.
Whoa! Why jinx it?
It's gonna happen. We know you're going to get some good, you're going to get some bad, but this was a very important night for the good to come out, and we hope that when we have that bad Devonte game, because it's coming, that guys like Al step up and other guys step up. And just, we know how this experience is. Now, the path to Indiana being really good is for there to be more good Devonte than we've seen in the past, a higher proportion of it. But, you're going to go through some highs and lows, and tonight was an incredible high. The thing, that to me, the shooting, there'll be some inconsistencies there. We know the turnovers are going to happen, and they're going to happen in bunches. But when he's defending like he did tonight, when he's rebounding, when he's doing those things, when he's active with his hands, getting deflections, like that's the kind of stuff that he can do night after night after night after night, even if, his offense is struggling a little bit. And so, that's why I was so encouraged to see that. But yeah, Devonte Green.
The other thing that goes along with it is our text chain from during the game, during which Coach, within not even a minute of each other, sent these two tweets in succession. Devonte out of control. Devonte under control. It was more of the latter, so that's a good thing.
By the way, did you notice honorable mention to Mike Roberts, who just went nuts on the sideline at one point? I think it was in the first half. I don't know what. Like someone must have missed a defensive assignment or something. It wasn't like for an obvious thing. It's just, I guess, Mike Roberts' eagle eye, picking out someone with like a bad help rotation or something. But he went nuts on the sideline. I know Coach was cheering and,
loving it.
Very excited about that. All right. So what else have we not talked about? I mean, we should certainly give that was a funny quote, Andy, about, with Archie Miller, not a lot of coaching went into what Devonte did, but I thought Archie Miller, he had his guys ready to play, and, they executed the game plan tonight. I mean, the game plan is pound it inside, get to the free throw line, own the glass. They did that. I thought, there was a certain time there in the second half where Jerome Hunter and Demezy were really shaky with their ball handling. He got Jerome out of there and he trusted Demezy, and Demezy, proved him right, as we've talked about. And so, I thought he shortened the bench. Joey Brunk didn't play a ton in the second half. He would come in for a few spells here and there, but I think Archie realized that they were really able to take advantage of Indiana on the defensive end when Joey was in there. And Deron Davis played that one stretch for 1 minute and didn't see the floor again. So overall, it kind of felt like the rotations made some sense, had the guys ready to play, and they went out and executed the game plan. So, tip of the cap to Archie Miller and the coaching staff for, being able to navigate this game without Rob Finney, and with it being the first real test of the season, they passed it.
Yeah, I thought with the lineup stuff in particular, they really pushed the right buttons at pretty much every turn. Brunk was really struggling, particularly at the beginning of the second half. But again, even in the first half, some of the same stuff, the overly aggressive hedge and things like that, where I think we've beaten that into the ground a little bit. But I really thought, Florida State made the first move to go small coming out of the locker room. But I thought Archie was relatively quick to change that up. And as you said, with Demezy, really had Al off the floor for a decent amount toward the end, had Demezy in there, and I think he played well. And he really stuck with the group that was playing well together. So overall a good performance. Another good Archie quote, speaking of him, on the performance at the free throw line: schedule this, schedule that. We're a team that is built to do one thing really well, and that's get fouled.
I mean, it's true.
Play in the paint, you'll pick up fouls on the opposing team.
But that speaks to what you said, though. Like there's a clear philosophy, whether that's born out of I'm not sure what else to do with this team, or whether that's born out of I really think this is an efficiency. Like they know what they want to do, and they have really, regardless of opponent, been able to come out and execute that pretty well. Now maybe somebody's going to be able. to adjust and force them away from that and really, pack it in, force them to make shots from the outside. That day will come, I'm sure. But for now, they've really got a firm philosophy, and what to look for coming into the game. And you've got a handful of things that you can really look at statistically and say, these are going to tell me pretty quickly whether they're playing well and playing the way they want to in any given game.
No,
and
look,
if that day comes, by the way, Andy, and if that day comes, and if Demezi is a guy that you can trust, that's going to help out a ton when people start packing the paint, because there's a guy who can step out and make shots. That's why his play is such a big development.
Guys, I don't know what you're worried about. I'm sure we're going to go to the line 38 times at the Kohl Center. I don't know what you're...
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. By the way, okay, so before we talk about that impending trip to the Kohl Center, great quote from Leonard Hamilton on Indiana, throwing a little shade at Purdue. There's no doubt that this is the best team we've played to this point.
I mean, he's not wrong.
Yeah. I'll just agree. Hilarious technical foul that he got, by the way.
Yeah. First of all, that was the fast. Like, I'll take it, but that was the fastest 5-second call I've seen in a very long time. And quite frankly, I agreed with him arguing it.
And how about Justin Smith just hammering that guy on the drive where he didn't touch him?
I know. And they showed the replay. And it was just like, really?
Well, the worst part was they showed where one of the officials was who actually blew the whistle, who was in no position to see whether there was any contact whatsoever.
Ah, well. Who cares?
Oh, well.
We won by 16.
There you go.
Do we need to talk about anybody else? I mean,
no, I think we
can save some of that for Assembly Call Radio. We pointed out most of the big things. So let's look ahead. Indiana has not won the Kohl Center in forever. It feels like it's been 75 years. It hasn't been quite that long, but it's been a lot. But that's where we go on Saturday. And if the chat mob is to be believed, Indiana is actually favored in KenPom. And this is true. Indiana now 65-64 is the expected score there, with a 52% chance to win for Indiana. Andy, as you look toward that game, I mean, this Wisconsin team, they are 56th in KenPom right now. They've obviously, they had a really nice performance against Marquette, beating them by 16, but they've lost 3 games, all to top 100 competition. But, they kind of seem to be struggling to find themselves a little bit, and they are not in the top 100 offensively right now. So, what should we expect, and where are the opportunities for Indiana to really take advantage of this Ethan hapless Wisconsin?
Ooh, hapless. Interesting. Now, I think all their 3 losses have come on neutral floors. KenPom, traditionally very high on Wisconsin, has clearly turned on them, predicting them to lose their next 3 in a row, including a road game at Rutgers, which I suppose we have seen with Wisconsin before, but not too much lately. I think defensively, you're going to see similar things to what you normally would. They do rank pretty well on that side of things. They really prevent offensive rebounds, which, as we talked about, will be interesting for IU, and they keep opponents off the line. So they're 11th in defensive rebounding percentage, and they're 33rd in defensive free throw rate. So, those are 2 of the keys really for IU. So how well IU can overcome those things will be important. And then on the offensive side, I think they're really just struggling. There's not really any one thing short of shooting free throws well, where they're 7th in the country as I look at this now. They haven't shot the 3 particularly well. They're outside of the top 130 in each of the 4 factors offensively. So I think similar to what most people would have suspected, in the sense that it was going to be a transitional time for them as they move away from Hap. And even though in some ways it was easy to point out his limitations in terms of being able to step out on the floor and make shots, they ran so much through him, even when he wasn't the one shooting. It just I think it's a difficult transition as you move forward with him. So a lot of the names are guys who have been around in terms of Brad Davison and Demetric Trayce in the backcourt, and Nate Reavers in the front court is really the guy to watch there. But it's a team right now that's still searching a little bit, and potentially a good time to face them. They play at NC State on Wednesday. I was going to say tomorrow, but I guess technically for me that's today at this point. So if anybody wants to at least kind of get an idea of what they look like this year, that's a potential game to watch and kind of see. So they've got a bit shorter turnaround, although they're got the game at home on Saturday. So it's no IU fan is going to go into the Kohl Center with any confidence whatsoever under any circumstance. But I do think if there's a reasonable time to catch Wisconsin, I think now, while they're still trying to sort things out, particularly on the offensive end, is a good time to do it.
Ryan, would you like to offer any words of wisdom?
What's the over under on fake charges that Brad Davidson's going to take and get called?
4.5.
4.5. You see the other night where he had 5 and 4 of them were clearly blocks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Well, we have plenty of time to talk about that.
If they're sending out, you know how they always talk about in the NFL when they're doing like rule changes and they go around to the teams and have like a video like showing them what these calls look like. Do you think that the video they sent around to get the whole new flopping rule out there is just like all Brad Davidson, or is it like just 90%?
I think it's 90%.
It's his YouTube mixtape. Yeah.
I think it's 90% Brad Davidson.
Yeah,
that
I think
guy,
so.
Man. I love that he has this reputation. Oh, he's such a good defender. He'll step in and take a charge. He's a terrible defender. If you're flopping on the ground, you're not a good defender. I'm sorry. It's like when Wojo used to have that reputation. He'd step in and take charges. Everybody like, oh my God, he's such a good defender. It's like, no, he's on his back, and the guy who he's defending has the ball.
What's up, Ryan? Ethan here.
This is why he doesn't listen to the episodes that you're on.
I know. I'm sure he's good friends with Brad Davidson, taught him everything he knows.
All right,
let's get out of here on a positive note.
I know.
Come on.
I know. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Remember, because you're an Assembly Call listener, you get 30% off your order at homefieldapparel.com. So I don't know if they have the 30% off code going publicly anymore, because I know it was that Black Friday deal was supposed to end, but you can get it for sure with the Cyber Assembly promo code. So if you want a great deal on the most comfortable and unique IU apparel that you will find anywhere, go to homefieldapparel.com, use that promo code CYBERASSEMBLY to get 30% off your entire order. All right, guys, it is time for last call. Let's wrap this up, bring it back around with some positive thoughts about this huge victory for Indiana over Florida State by 16 points tonight. Andy, you're in the Eastern time zone, so you get to go first.
Good. Glad to such a benefit of being in the Eastern time zone. Just a really, there, like we said, there were plenty of things. Some of the turnovers were ugly at times and felt like a reversion to what we had seen in the past. But for a team that's pretty young to be able to overcome those against a really strong defensive team, certainly playing at home helps. But for a team that, their MO, their identity is to really just grind people down, and IU played some of its best basketball at the end of the game after using a pretty short rotation over most of the second half. I thought that was as impressive as anything we saw in this game. Devonte stepping up was huge, as we've talked about, and the kind of leadership that you look for from him, and the kind of game that, if you spun forward his performances from the end of last season to this one, the kind of thing that you really looked for and hope to see a lot of. So those are definitely the positives. Team passed the first real test, I guess if you want to think of it that way, and now it becomes the schedule for all the complaints about it and things like that. It is kind of a progression. They work their way up to get ready for this game. I think we all felt like by the end of the South Dakota State game that they were kind of done looking at that. We were kind of done watching them play teams like that. And so tonight was the first test, and they passed it. Now the next test is, can you go and handle your first road game in a place where you've traditionally had little to no success? And can you follow up a big win by not having a letdown in that scenario when, nobody's going to get terribly upset if you lose that game in the Kohl Center, despite Wisconsin being down. But how do you follow up a performance like this? And I thought that was, I think that's what I'm most interested to see as we move forward. But as we talked about before, from an identity standpoint, I think this team is starting to get one, and that's something that's really been lacking. We spent so much of last season trying to figure out, what's this team really good at? What do they stand for? Who are they? And you clearly don't have an identity when you're losing 12 out of 13 games. And I think this team, for better or worse, you can like it or not, their identity is trying to get to the free throw line, really being tough on the glass, and improving defensively. And so if tonight was a good step in that direction, I think it's another step further toward a team really defining its identity and giving an idea of what they can be going forward. And that based on tonight's performance, is exciting to see. And like I said, hopefully they can follow that up with a road win to start Big Ten play in December, which I know Ryan loves.
Yes.
It's my favorite thing.
Ryan, tip off at 4:00 Eastern. What are we
Solid.
thinking about that? Okay,
It's
is that okay?
It's good. It's an evening game, I would say. Late afternoon, evening. I'm good with that. Noon is what I don't like. Noon is the no.
Okay,
Is the
just
no.
wanna-
Mostly because I don't want to watch a college basketball game at 9 a.m. Let's be real. I want to settle into my day, not be screaming at the television at 9:15 in the morning. No, I think that tonight was a huge win for Archie Miller and the program, finally on a national stage to be questioned about your schedule and all that stuff, and then come out and get a 16-point win over a top 15, top 17 team that people are really talking about as being one of the better teams in the ACC this year. And this was a good team, and it was a well-coached team, and a team that does some things that usually make Indiana sort of skittish, like pressure the ball, and especially without your starting point guard. I mean, there's a lot going on here that did not bode well for Indiana, and the Hoosiers handled all of it and won going away by 16 points. I don't think you can undervalue what happened in Bloomington tonight. Devonte Green also stepping up as a senior leader and showing out and having a huge game, when stepping up, especially when his team needed it. I mean, most of those threes came, and those big shots that he made came when the team really needed a bucket, and he stepped up. And as we know, and we've seen in the past, that's not always going to happen with Devonte. He's not always going to hit those, but he stepped up big time tonight and helped prove that the team he's a captain of is for real, and not a paper undefeated team just because they haven't played anybody. I thought he stepped up and played really well. This is a team that's going to continue to learn, build, and grow. And I think that there's some guys who didn't have great games tonight who can still be a huge part of this team moving forward. And they need to see what happened, learn, and move up. I mean, you think about it, this team missed 15 free throws, and that hasn't been their MO this year. They've made free throws this year. They missed 15. This could have been an even bigger win if they just took care of business there. They turned it over 18 times. They cut back on those. This could have been an even bigger win. They could have hung 100 if they had played a little tighter. So these are things that this team, you can be excited about this win, but the ceiling on this team is much higher than they showed tonight, because there were a lot of mistakes and a lot of problems and a lot of things they got to work through. And the offense stagnated, and the defense gave up easy drives at a couple of points, but they still were able to work it out and make a statement with a big win tonight. And that's encouraging. The fact that this team can continue to get better, and that they really showed something tonight with that fight and that heart.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you love to see from tonight. I mean, I talked about on the halftime report when Indiana was up 11 that Florida State was undoubtedly going to grind their way back into it, and Indiana was going to have some offensive droughts. And how they responded to those moments would be what told the story of the rest of this game. And they responded great. Trayce Jackson-Davis kind of, helped them maintain that lead around the 8-minute mark, and then Devonte took over after that. And it was just, it was great to see a team really come together and play together. And you saw a lot of communication on the court, like every time it, cut to close-ups of the guys, they were talking and communicating. And that's not something that we always saw last year. And that was nice to see. So, look, you don't want to overreact to one victory. And we can all just think back to last year. Indiana dominated Marquette, early in the season at home. And, so these wins, it doesn't mean anything when January comes and when February comes. It's certainly going to mean something in March when it comes to your NCAA tournament resume, because this will, almost surely be, one of those tier 1, tier A, whatever it is, victories, that you're looking to stack. But, the most important thing is, and you guys mentioned this, it really seemed like you saw a team and maybe even a program establish an identity. That Florida State team is tough, and they are a defensive-minded team. And Indiana stood toe-to-toe with them without their best defender, without their most reliable ball handler, and they won that game by 16 points. And that is impressive. I mean, this is a building block victory in a lot of ways for Indiana. Got to keep improving, got to keep evolving. But, you couldn't have asked for anything more from this program on December 3rd, from this team on December 3rd, than what you got tonight. And that bodes well for the future. It feels like Archie Miller really likes this team, and I think you saw why tonight. Because they play together and they play tough. And that's what you want. And if you can, get some more continuity together in the pack line and, establish even more chemistry together on offense, got a chance to be pretty good. And then that's what I exit tonight thinking. We got a squad. We got a team, and no one was quite sure what to think in November, even though we had some good performances. But I think now we know, okay, we got a team. Let's go. Let's face December head on. Let's see what we got. Get Rob back. Get even better. But a really good night for Indiana, a huge victory. And obviously we look forward to seeing what the Hoosiers do from here on out with the Wisconsin game coming up on Saturday. All right, that's going to do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. If you ever want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall, and don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to longtime listener Bob Thompson, who produced a lot of the music that you hear on the show. And thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk with you Thursday for Assembly Call Radio and then after the Wisconsin game. Until then.
Take it from me, Robert Johnson. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
I have a mad crush on Coach Roberts.
Good stuff, gentlemen. That was fun. That was fun.
What's the schedule for the rest of the week? So we got Thursday
night. I'll make sure. I think hopefully Coach can come on Thursday. Let's get him on Thursday so we get his thoughts on the game. So someone can take the night off.
I'll be doing Wednesday and Thursday, so I'll be up in 6 hours. I still have to work for like another hour, and then I got to be up for 3:30 in the morning for the morning radio show for 2 days. That 3 a.m., that 3:30 alarm comes fast, man. Tell you.
It does. It comes fast. As Andy's over there, it's like almost Thursday in the Eastern time zone. Andy doesn't want to hear it.
It's well into Thursday, actually.
Oh, yeah. We're 12:30. I got up at 6 a.m. this morning so I could go to work early so that I could leave to go to Hannah's middle school game. So, yeah, I'm struggling. Although I was struggling at like 8:30 this morning. So I'm really hitting my stride now.
Yeah. We're not as young as we used to be.
No, definitely not.
I got to go get some sleep.
Definitely not.
Good stuff. Thanks, everybody, for being here. By the way, that was the biggest live audience that we've ever had. It got up over 500 at a few points. That is the most that I've ever seen. So thank you all for being here. Even this,
that's awesome.
So much fun to linger on these wins.
It is. It is.
By the way, I saw Jen like 10 minutes ago in the chat say Devonte got 30. How did I miss that? Yeah, Jen.
Were you not watching the game, Jen?
Felt like an important storyline. I'm not here to
not here to
cast
judge
aspersions on her by any means, but
she called herself out, so I feel comfortable calling her out. But
not exactly paying a whole lot of attention. But, I knew there was a game going on, but
oh man,
it was gorgeous.
Yes, it was gorgeous. It certainly was.
All right, boys.
See y'all. Have a great night.
Thanks, everybody. See you guys.
Talk to you Thursday night.